We will call to
Thank you,
order
Bill.
this August 16, 2022 meeting of Lawrence County Retirement Board. Will all please rise for the pledge of allegiance, followed by a brief moment of silence. Vanessa, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And all please remain standing for a brief moment of silence. Thank you. Vanessa, you've come so far since the first time I've done that. I always try to pick a random person to do the pledge and see if I can't throw them off guard a
So
little
be
bit.
ready, it could be you. Did you do it this time? Okay.
Zoom
All
or
right.
something. I was like,
And the first, I think the first couple times it was Vanessa. The first time she's ready now. She's
yes,
waiting for it. The ears are perked
I'm
up.
expecting it.
Okay.
Vanessa, please call the roll.
Treasurer Rapone,
Present.
Controller Prestipine,
Here.
Commissioner Steelvogel,
Here.
Commissioner Vogler,
Here.
Commissioner Boyd.
Here. Are there any public comments today? Seeing none. We have minutes from May 24th, 2022, which was the last meeting of this board. I'll take a minute to let my colleagues check that over and take a motion to approve the minutes or make any changes as necessary and expedient. We didn't really vote on anything at that meeting, but nonetheless, obviously we have minutes from.
So moved.
Second.
We have motion second, any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next, we have our consultant report for our fund manager, Sarah. Always good to see you. Thanks for making the drive.
No problem.
What do we have going on with the fund? Floor is yours.
All right, so what we'll do is we'll talk a little bit about what happened in the second quarter, a little bit of better news going forward, but we are reporting the second quarter. So if you just want to open your books, and we're going to go to Exhibit 1. Just a quick update, Marquette update, just so you know, we have our investment symposium on the 22nd. It will be on our YouTube channel. You're invited to go to Chicago if you would like, or get online, but it's good. And then we also do our halftime market insight webinar. So I mean, if you're want to question or have any questions about the market, this is good. I think the one thing that I really want to note is that I look at COVID and we always go back to that, but that almost seems like 2020, so much has changed. And one of the things that really changed for us at Marquette is we ended up hiring so many employees because the business grew, they kind of needed consultants, and so we were able to do that. Westchester, we've added a couple more performance analysts and research analysts, so that's been great for us. And you can also see that in the work that we're doing in the within the pension plan. Thank you very much. So if we go to Exhibit 2, we're going to talk a little bit about that market and what has happened. And we really know that, we saw what happened with real GDP growth in the second quarter. And you can see that it just started to go down. And we know that there has been a slowdown in private inventory. And then one of the things that we really saw was, the CPI. So June, it came in at 9.1. year after year, and we saw that market really go down, and you're going to see that, it was a negative quarter. Then in July, it was only down 8.5% year to date, year over year. So the market kind of said, all right, it's inflation and what's happening there. And then, but what is interesting about that number, it actually excludes food and energy prices. So the real CPI is actually for June was 5.9% year over year if you exclude that. But when you're looking at inflation, inflation is really the consumer and what's going on. And we look at that through gas prices, we look at that through food prices. So, and then we have this, labor market. We look at what's going on with the labor market. We know that we look at the jobless claims, and I think we have to be we say, what's a recession? We said, currently, there's two definitions now of a recession. 2 quarters back to back, negative GDP, and then you go look at the recession and people say, well, there can't be, because one thing that's not in that number is the jobless claims, and we look at the job market. So you say, okay, well, we're not really in a recession. We have seen the market start to go back up a little bit. Interestingly enough, though, if you look at those job numbers are fairly skewed. This is 2020 COVID. So think about how many layoffs, and people came back, and people didn't come back. So we really don't know where we are in this market, standing and looking at all of these, figures on what's going to happen with that being a recession or not a recession. So that has become interesting. We look at inflation. We know that inflation, like just as I said, was 9.1%. So when we look at that and we look at what's happening, we know for one thing that the Fed's got to do. They've got to raise rates. And if you look at page 11, you know how we always put that short-term interest rates, and I always find this is interesting. We look at what the future market is saying, and we look at what the Fed's saying. And this was as of 6:30, the Fed's like, nope, we're going to keep hike. And the futures market was kind of like, you know what, not sure how much you're going to do that, because at one point we heard some of the Fed board say, we'll hike into like mid-2023, and then we're going to start lowering it again. So for September, we expect the market to go possibly for them to hike again at 75 basis points. That's what they said they were going to do. They lean towards that. With some of the data that's coming out right now, we expect that possibly it could be a 50 basis point hike. And, we look at how that affects the individual, the consumer. Years ago, if you look at probably when some of us bought our first homes, interest rates were 10 to 14%. So, it's not that, but everybody's been so used to the 0%. And we believe that at one point the Fed, when they just lowered it, probably got a little bit more aggressive on there. So now they've got to get up. So they have to find a happy medium, and we hope that they do, in 2023, 2024 there. If you turn the page, we look at what's happening, and we look at what outside the global economy. So we know everything has been really struggling. And I think this graph up there with the PMI versus Sweden. So when we look at Sweden, which has historically led economic activity across the Eurozone, the ratio of new orders versus inventories implies that Eurozone manufacturing PMI data will fall into contractly levels in the coming months. So we mean that those are going to go down. So not only are we seeing issues in the United States, we're also looking at the global economy. And while the dollar is very strong, usually when you have a strong dollar, you can see that, companies are doing better overseas. It doesn't cost them as much. And that really has not affected that. Usually that is strong dollar means a little bit better for us in the international markets. Remember in the first quarter, we talked about China, and China said absolute zero COVID policy. And we looked at how that was really affecting the market. And, we know like imports, we know that, so many things are delayed because they weren't exporting. So China came out and they said, okay, so what are we going to do? And they decided to kickstart their economic growth. They put over $1 billion into, or 1.1 trillion, funds available for infrastructure spending. So once we start to see that economy go up, and we'll see what those effects are, we're hoping that the global economy will do better. And when we look at your performance, we always say emerging markets are the first to go down the hardest, but they're usually the first to go up a little bit. So it's always nice to have a little bit of exposure, which you do, to that. Page 13, look at that. There was nowhere to go. In June, the fixed income market was down 10% bonds, and then the equities were down about 13%. It's only happened 3 times in the market historically. So we were really in there. So we look at those, and you can see the only thing was commodities, obviously gas. US bonds were down double digits. High yield was down. So really at this point, the only thing that you could have done, and that was good for you, was to be protective in the down market. We'll look at that when we look at your portfolio. Let's just turn the page to 14. Obviously, you can see energy was in the, and utilities were the positive sectors for the quarter. And then we look at value stocks outperformed growth stocks. And for about 16 quarters, value stocks were underperforming growth stocks because there was this huge thing in the market for a couple of years. You know, we saw those tech stocks, we saw the 5 big stocks running the market, and we looked at growth versus value. Well, you know, if the market's going up 20%, who wants to be in something that's only going to be 13? You know, but value are the considered the dividends as well. So that has really played out. You know, at one point, at Marquette, we discussed at the investment policy meetings and everything, what do we want to do? Do we still want to take this value tilt? And we have kept that value tilt, and that has helped you a little bit. I think page 15 is really interesting. We put in where the bear markets were. And some of you, you know, have gone through some of these. We look at what happened in 2000 to 2002. That was September, 2001, September 11. So we know that the market really had a hard time with that, and they were actually down 50.5%, and then they went into a recession. I find it very interesting if you look at the last line, look at February to March. There were 4 trading days in that COVID when it started that actually put us into a recession, and that drawdown was 35.4%. But was it really truly a true recession? Because the entire country, Europe, I mean, everywhere had shut down. You know, you look at, I know some of the counties are working with a third of their employees laid off, and then they've slowly brought them back. People are doing work from home. You know, so everything said recession, but was that really truly a recession? So we say the average drawdown's about 31%, the median's about 28%. Through June, the S&P has seen a maximum drawdown of nearly 25%. So we haven't really entered that bear market yet. And then we look at what has happened with the economics and the contraction. Look at U.S. equities versus high yields and how they have done in high yields. High yield was very good for the portfolio for a while. We almost looked with everything that was going on with spreads that we were going to actually get back into it. So for about a week or two, we thought we were going to do that. We actually lowered all our high yields thing because actually the spreads have not been that bad with the fixed income market. And for July, the fixed income market was actually positive territory, which was nice. And it's the first time that the fixed income market has actually seen some positive returns in quite a while. Are there any questions on the market? Let's turn to Exhibit 3. Let's talk a little bit how you have done. So at the end of June, you were at 88.1 million. So you were down about, for the quarter, 9.5. And I think this is really very important. But you outperformed, after all the fees were taken out, the market over 200 basis points. The market, your benchmark, what you did, if you just gone into index funds in every single place you were, would have been down 11.6. So it has, you know, that defensive year to date, the fund returned a negative 13.2, but your policy index was down 15.4. So you've done that. Now year to date, when we look at it through July, you're only down 8.8. You added 4.8%. And then last week you were at $93.9 million. So, you know, we have seen a little bit of a correction. It would be great if we just get to like 0.2% or, you know, wipe some of these negative gains out there. Since inception, you've annualized 6.8% and had an investment gain of $41 million. So you're right on track there. And then positive attribution for the quarter was asset allocation. Remember all those changes we've made in asset allocation? That really came to fruition now. Then you had outperformance by U.S. equity manager Eaton Vance, outperformance by your active and your global non-U.S. equities. So what we're going to do is we'll look at some of those particular. Negative is just fixed income. Fixed income managers really didn't have anywhere to go. And for years, they were all going short, waiting for the Fed to raise rates, waiting to see a better thing. So that was great, so they all held short bonds. Then what happened was they were holding short bonds, let's say at 1%. Then now with the Fed going up, they were issuing, we'll just do a 1 year at 1%, 5 year, the new one was issuing at 3%. So they were holding bonds, but the new bonds that were being released, well, they couldn't sell the bonds that weren't paying anything for the newer bonds. So they really had a hard time going short, but some managers were able to lock in a longer time to get a little bit more return on this. So the fixed income managers just have had a really tough time. We're not concerned, they're off by a couple basis points, but we just believe that that's actually going to be a really tough sector. And that's why we took down a lot of your fixed income and diversified that. Your real estate composite for the first quarter returned 4.9, and for the trailing 12 months, 28.4%. So that real estate's done very well for you. Real estate is shifting. It's struggled a little bit now. We know there's going to be some struggles with real estate, just depending on the economy, what we look at. You know, we've now seen the aftermath of COVID, you know, all those office buildings, people working from home. We knew real estate was very smart. They got out of the retail sector. You know, your big manager said, we don't want to be in retail. Started to see that shifting because of all the online. And what is really benefited your managers is they all went into industrial. So the Amazon warehouses, storage and everything. So that has been a nice return for you within that sector. Are there any questions so far? All right, so let's turn to page 30, and we can talk a little bit about how your managers have done. And when we look at your U.S. equity composite, so when we look at that, your total equity composite for the year was down 14, the market was down 16. Eaton Vance was down 11.8 versus 17%. That is your active manager. When the market kind of goes up, they don't go up as much, but they really, really protected you. And through that, you can see they have annualized since February. So for like 8 years, they've annualized 11% a year. So that's a very nice manager. And we always talk about trying to find a large cap manager that will be able to outperform for the cost. And it's very, very hard. So Eaton Vance is actually a SMID. It's within the U.S. equity, but it's small and mid cap, and they've done very well. And then we put in 2 years ago your Vanguard Small Cap Value Index Fund, and that's done nice for you. That has averaged about 19.6% annualized over the last 2 years. I always like to look at the global equity composite because in a down market, it's always fun to report because they're outperforming. In an up market, they just don't. They do what they do. You need that exposure. They do well. But they have really protected you in their Dodge and Cox has done very well for you. Year to date, they were down 7, the market was down 12.3. AB Global, we put in there, they have done well. And then MFS is your protector in a low volatility. So when the market starts to go up, MFS does really well. So all of these put together have done, since we have been with you, they've annualized 7.9 versus 7.1 every year, year over year. So we always get the ups and downs, but our most important thing is when you're looking here, as we know, if you've got $1, it goes down to 50 cents, it doesn't take 50 cents to go back up, it takes another $1 to go up. So really that protection has done well for you there. And then we go to non-US equities, you can see the same thing. We put Harding and Lover in there. They've come back a little bit. And Wellington Emerging Market Opportunities had a nice quarter, down 9.1 versus 11.4. We did put them in January. They had just an off quarter. And we know that you don't just look at a manager for a quarter. You look 3, 5, 7 years on there. Look at real estate. Real estate has done very well for you. Clarion has averaged 14% since we put them in August 2019. And then TA Realty we put in October 21, so almost a year ago. And they have done 13.7 versus 12%. So that's really nice. So it's interesting, when we went in, you're gonna see a little bit of redemption from real estate. So in June, every client, fixed income and equities, right out of asset allocation. And that market was moving so fast, so you couldn't take out a fix to put into equities, because then you would just take fixed down. You couldn't take out equities to put fixed, so we went back and we took some out of real estate across the board with a lot of our clients, and just said, look, we've had some gains in real estate and we wanted to take some in. We also knew that you have benefit payments to make, so we took a little bit off and we took some of the income that you've gotten out of there. So that made a lot of sense to do that. So it was very interesting for us because we just didn't know anywhere to go at that point, and that has not happened, at least when I looked at asset allocation for about 10 years. This was just a very hard market that was just going up and down, just didn't fall. So hopefully it's starting to find its speed again a little bit. Infrastructure, we put in April 2022, and we will get those numbers because we need to do a full quarter on there. But infrastructure was up for the quarter just across the board. Turn the page, we look at defensive equity. Defensive equity did fairly well versus the benchmark. And then we talked about fixed income. They just had a little bit of struggle. We look at the Lord Abbott High Yield Fund. They did well for you. They did 5.7 since March. So they were actually in positive territory. Now that the spreads have gone against the high yield, we've actually lowered that allocation to the high yield. And then the nice thing is, even with, and then we also put you into CS&Key fixed income, and that is your active manager. And you can see since May, they were down 1.4 versus 1.6. And the reason why is we finally got to the point where it made sense to get an individual separate account manager. CS&Key was pick over 30 Pennsylvania County clients. Their fixed income for Wells Fargo number one, number two in the country. And we also like to use Pennsylvania managers when we can. We think that's important. That we have worked with them for years. So we just thought it was time to get an active manager within that portfolio. You're large enough to diversify it. And CS&Key, because we have worked so much with them, they really gave you a really nice break on fees through the market. Are there any questions?
Question on page 35. The beta. You know, it's been forever since I've done anything whatsoever related to finance. You have the upside deviation, downside deviation, the composite and the index. Is that, I mean, for the 17 through 22, is that 12? I mean, is that 12.2? That seems like a hell of a deviation. Is that COVID?
Where's summary statistics?
Yeah.
The policy, the downside deviation, yeah, you've had, I mean, go look at that graph, look at the ups and the downs. I mean, we just have had such a different volatility. You don't usually say that number, but then we look at the risks. Your portfolio is under the, your beta's at 95 with 100. So yes, it has been a COVID.
Just that roll. I'm assuming that's just the last couple of years.
I think it's not only COVID. I think what we've really got is we do not have, when we look at this, we know that, they're saying, okay, inflation isn't there as much. But I think when we go out, we go to the gas pump, we go to the grocery store, we look at things like that. We look at that if we've had a variable interest rate, there are going to be things that are just going to start coming in that the consumer's like, I don't understand. I can't believe that, we're not in a recession. I can't believe what's happening in this economy. But then there's all those, economic statistics. They're very different from that. So I think we're, personally, I think that when we look at what's happening with those interest rates, I don't think that's as bad. I think we've got, again, the student loan debt is a huge issue out there on what's going to happen. And you've got people who have put their kids through school, who've refinanced that house and have done that. And you've got, and then, maybe they got a 5-year or a 10-year, then they're going to refinance. And then money was so cheap, everybody said, I'll buy the boat, I'll buy the extra car, I'll do this. Well, now you gotta fill that up, you've gotta figure out what you're gonna do. We've seen the real estate market take a little bit of a drop here in Pennsylvania. You know, that all-time high last year into the year has gone down a little bit. Harder for people to, you know, first-time homeowners. Mind you, it's a lot cheaper than a lot of interest rates that we've paid in previous, but you're also starting to see those credit cards. And when you've got credit cards coming out and saying you can do 4 payments and then go to the gas and go fill your tank with gas, you do have an issue with that. You've also seen a lot of small businesses never get back on their feet. So, you know, there's kind of the global economy, and then there's the economy that I think you might see, as you were saying, Newcastle or in Lawrence County that we see, you know, in Allegheny County, or I've got clients to see up north in Carbon County. So, you know, there's a lot of different moving sections to that economy there.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? I think you're well diversified. I think you've really kind of held your own through the market being down. I think we've pulled a lot of that volatility out when we've made those changes to go into global. We've made the changes to go change international. You made the changes to infrastructure, real estate. I think you're at a really good diversification, and this isn't for just 1 year, 2 year. You look at 5, 10, 20, 30 years. So I think it's a nice foundation, and I think you've done very well.
Anything further?
No?
All right.
Is there any questions?
No. It's always good to hear good news.
And the other thing I want to note is that even in the down market, because of actions taken
Right.
by this board and former boards, as well as your stewardship of the fund, we're still in a much better position than I'd say probably 65 to 85% of counties around Pennsylvania.
I think you'll see that in the county database report that we always go over next year. I think that's gonna be a really interesting thing to see that and what it is. And you know what? Market goes up 10, you go up 8, great. You're fine, you're doing well. It's when the market goes down, and then what does that do? Then you do your actuarial, you lock that number in, next thing you know, your ABC's going up, your funding's going down. So that really is, you know, to be conservative on a pension fund. It's very important, so.
Absolutely. No, we want to put the taxpayers in the best possible position to be able to pay the debt obligations to the county employees. And you got your stewardship has done that, and I'd like to think this board has worked its hardest to accomplish that as well. New business. The discussion possible for an enter into a contract. I believe the Board of Commissioners did that. I don't think this board has contracting authority. Did we not vote to approve a contract with you guys? Sign, seal, deliver?
Yes.
Yep. So we can take that off unless there's any
Okay.
objections to that. We do have a resolution changing the assumed rate of investment return to be lowered from 7% to 6.75%. Somebody please explain that to me.
Can I ask, where did that come from when I looked at this?
I'm assuming are you making this as a recommendation to us?
No, that would be your actuary. And
This, Dave sent this to me.
Dave
Press the
Pressline.
button, yeah.
Oh,
Sarah, you know anything about it?
I think that's your actuary, and I think, you know, that's gonna change your ADC. I think we should get your actuary in here for a meeting, Hay Group or Corn Ferry now, and have them explain and run over those scenarios. I would love to see it 6.75, I think it'd be great, but that's a whole different issue on being able to afford to do it. And you may be in a great position to do it, but I can't advise you until A, I see the report, B, how much it's gonna cost you, and I think it would be really important. Let's see if we can get
I
Corn
agree with
Ferry in here
I
and talk
agree
to
with
you, and I would be happy to do that meeting here too.
Yeah, I don't want to make a change that might impact the budget. And I don't know what we're doing here. This is the first time. That's the first time I've seen this. I don't know about anybody here. What we can do is we can call another meeting sooner than our final meeting here coming up in November, maybe?
Oh, no, yeah, you should absolutely.
I was under the impression that both of these were already done, we were just gonna formally taking action today, so.
Morgan,
Maybe you are correct.
do you remember when Dave was sending those series of emails?
Yes.
And then he was asking us,
Were we opposed to
were we
anything?
opposed to anything,
Yes.
and we were all in line with pretty much what he was proposing.
Mhm.
I know, I think one was with the contract, but then you folks have to do that. Was anything mentioned with the actuary?
Let's find out.
We did do the contract, we did
Yeah,
that.
contract's
Did the
done.
contract
that
already?
was-
I don't
yeah,
remember
but
seeing
This other one,
Corn Ferry in any of the emails, maybe that's what's throwing me off.
Something else he had said.
Oh, wait, I might have, yeah, right here.
Is that it?
Attached is the actuary report for 2022, including the reporter's calculation of ADC with the change in the assumed rate to 6.75%.
Okay.
He did say.
As we discussed, the ADC for 2022 is $110,167. This was June 13th. As of 1/1/2022, we're at 105% funded. If you have any questions, let me know. What the actuarial? Corn Ferry, dear Mr. Prestipine, we are pleased to present the results of our actual variation of the Lawrence County Employee Retirement System at the beginning of its 73rd year of operation. We have enclosed 6-pound pop, et cetera. Notice of report, what is this? That is a large document. So to that, it looks like the change, you're right, it looks like we're just formalizing something that's already been determined. And as we know, the budget figure will be $110,000, which is in the budget. We're good to cover that.
Okay.
So to that,
Well,
yeah,
can I jump in?
yes,
Real quick?
please.
It doesn't, going to 6.75 is gonna have an effect every year going forward.
Mhm.
So I'm sure Dave's looked at it, I just,
Want to bring the actuary in and have
no,
that?
I mean, it's all up to you, and I don't wanna jump into anything that you've done. I'm just saying is that you should understand that that's what it looks like, you're 105% funded, so it does, possibly, but that's not just 1 year that it goes down, so just so, or up.
Mhm.
Just so you know, and then next year, because you're probably not gonna meet that 6.75 or 7%, and I think that's great to do 6.75 if you do it. I'm just saying, is the question I have for you is, it's not just one-off raise in the ADC, so you should just ask that, but if you've all spent time and have looked at it and are comfortable with it, that's fine.
I would say at this point, I think we bring the actuary in, have another sit down with them, and we can always, it can't hurt to wait another couple of weeks. Just based on, you
Well, no,
seem very hesitant there, and so I
No,
wanna.
I just want
Right,
to,
you're right,
it's not,
right.
that's
true.
it's just, there's
That's
two
true.
things, as your investment consultant, that probably should have come to us.
Mhm.
Meaning, where are you, and this is yours, the actuary works for you, they don't work with us.
Right.
And I normally would be like, that's great, 6.75, I can't wait if you do that, I just want you as a board,
Mhm.
as being a consultant, to understand what the implications of that are. And if you have not reviewed that actuarial report with the actuary, I think you should do it before you pass it, that's just my opinion.
I agree with that. Is there any objection to hold off on that specific resolution for a couple of weeks until we can get Corn Ferry in here? Any objection to that?
Do you want to table it?
Yes.
I'll move to, I'm not sure what the number would be, but I'll move to table it. Oh, number one.
Yeah, that's the one.
This is resolution on the agenda AA. You
Yes,
have
AA.
withdrawn AB,
AB's
right?
were good.
Okay. I'll move to table resolution 2022-1.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Question is on the motion to table. Vanessa, please call the roll.
Treasurer Rapone,
Yes.
Deputy Controller Eppinger,
Yes.
Commissioner Steelvogel,
Yes.
Commissioner Vogler,
Yes.
Commissioner Boyd.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And we can reconvene here as soon as we can get the actuaries on board, and we'll go from there. Coordinate with you so you can be present for this too, just because, again,
Is there a September, what's it be to September? Tuesday the 20th? Is that the retirement board?
No, our next one is November,
No, we were.
but
so we want to
so,
do it early than that.
yeah.
Oh, so you can do it at any time, right?
Yeah,
So you're
We
not
can convene a
all-
meeting anytime.
Right.
would you be willing, or be willing, if necessary, to allow Sarah to Zoom in if she would have to?
I mean, I'm only gone for 1 week in September at one point.
Here's what we'll do, we'll coordinate, we won't make any decisions on when to have a special meeting right now. Vanessa, if you'd be able to coordinate with the controller's office for the actuary side, and with Sarah to find a good date to reconvene in September, to have the actuary come and give us a breakdown of what's going on. Make sure you're available to be present for that. I don't think we need to make a decision on a date right now.
Yeah, we'll need. I mean, yeah,
We're good.
I think it's a good thing.
Okay, sure. Well, sometimes we just rely on expertise, even from the controller's office, that they take care of so many things for us. It's like, yes, this is good, and then afterwards have some questions, and I'm sure could be answered very easily, right?
Not a big deal.
Morgan, I just wasn't aware of that email.
It was just 2022, the budget implications will be for 2022.
That's right, it's good.
Yep, I agree. All right, any public comments? Seeing none, any additional comments from any members of the board? No.
No.
Don't think so, that's already been passed. That's the contract. Yeah, that's passed through, the board of commissioners is a sole contract with authority for county warrants.
Okay.
Any additional comments from investment advisor? I will adjourn the August 16th meeting and we'll reconvene sometime in September to discuss proposed resolution 1. Meeting adjourned. Yeah,
Thank you.
Office, early office.
Thank you so much.
Yes.